All right, welcome to our first workshop Wednesday of the semester. We are here talking about graduate school prep, and we are so excited to have Rachel from GVSU, who's a recruiter there for their graduate programs, talk a little bit about graduate school and helping you decide if it's a right fit for you. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. Before I turn it over, sorry, I would like to say if you have any questions or anything like that, feel free to put them in the chat. And then we'll address all the questions at the end. We'll leave about 3 to 5 minutes so that we can go over some of your questions, okay? And now, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Rachel.
Hey, thanks so much, Courtney. I appreciate it. My name is Rachel. My last name is Vandenbroek, and I've spent 16 years in higher education in a variety of different places throughout the country, really. I've recruited for the University of Illinois at Chicago College of Pharmacy, Northern Illinois University's MBA program, and life finds me here at Grand Valley supporting our 43 graduate programs. But today we're going to be talking about, is graduate school right for you? We're going to do a fast 30 minutes. Okay. So hopefully, and Courtney, talk to me here. You can see my screen. So the agenda hopefully is find, fit, funding, and apply. Do you see that, Courtney, and the rest
Yes,
of the gang?
yes, we
Let's
see
do
it.
it. Okay. So if anybody at the end can say to me or find another word that starts with F that means apply, I'm happy to take suggestions. Okay. Because I do love alliteration. Also, when you see the clipboard here, that's a signal, excuse me, to you to maybe take some notes, right? I try to make this as interactive as possible through Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and the like. But see the clipboard? Note-taking time. So let's get started about find, fit, funding, and apply. So first of all, you've come today thinking about graduate school. So you're probably some of you may think, well, what is graduate school? Some of you probably already know what it is. So I'd like to do just a high level here about different opportunities in terms of master's degrees, professional masters, doctoral programs, JD, MD, or PharmD. There's a variety of different programs. So as you're thinking through, how do I find the right fit? Ask yourself, what are your career goals? Will a master's degree allow you to move into that next career position? Do you need a PhD? That will sometimes help you determine what type of program is the best fit for you. So an example would be a professional master's degree like an MBA or an MSW, or an example would be a data science and analytics program or cybersecurity. Many of those professional masters really have an internship piece woven into them, or potentially a field experience woven into them. So they really align themselves not only with professional development, but also with theory and application. Some of you, though, are like, no, no, Rachel, I want a master's degree program that's going to put me in a position to do a PhD. That's fine. A master's degree, many times for you, then would look like maybe a thesis or a culminating project, etc. Now, when you're looking at doctoral programs, this is where it becomes, we're going to talk about funding in a moment, about this idea of like, okay, I need to be fully funded via graduate assistantship or something of that nature. Others of you are thinking, I'm going to law school, or I'm preparing for medical school or veterinary school or pharmacy school. So that would be under JD, MD, etc. And so as you also think about graduate school, think about, for lack of a better phrase, return on investment. So for some of you, it's an entree, like I mentioned, into a career. You can't practice medicine without an MD, right? You can't become a speech language pathologist without doing a master's degree program. So if that's the case, that's great. Others of you may say, Rachel, I want to move into the workforce first. So those are questions to start thinking about as you kind of decide the type of graduate school, the program, etc. Okay, so let's do a little deeper dive into that. Um, Instead of a poll question, I just want you to think about what's motivating you to pursue graduate school. As I mentioned, is it going to start your career? Can you not enter the career without X degree, master's, PhD, MD, PharmD? Or do you say, you know what? I think it would be important for me to get some work experience first. And this master's degree program could be enhancing to my career. So, an example would be an MBA, where many times you might need 2 to 3 years of work experience to really make that program potentially meaningful to you, to advance that to that next step in your career. Or perhaps you've launched a career, you're thinking about it, and you might use a master's degree to pivot into a new industry or a new area of opportunity. So those are things to think about. What's motivating you to pursue graduate school? Is it a career starter, enhancer, changer perhaps? That will help you. Okay. So we found a graduate program. Now let's figure out, is it the right fit? You've probably heard that a lot, right? Because you've chosen Calvin as an undergraduate experience, and you might have discerned, right, out of a lot of different schools. You might be a transfer student to Calvin, and so you started a place, and now you found your fit at Calvin. I think the same thing goes in terms of finding a career, right? And then finding a graduate school post that is this idea of what do you find exciting? Where do your passions lie? What are some short-term and long-term goals that you have? Ah, you see the clipboard here. So I would jot a couple of these questions down. And again, in 30 minutes, we might not have the time, right, to dive in. But the good news for you is that you have an unbelievable Office of Career and Calling, right, at Calvin. And you have this unbelievable academic advisors, professors that care about who you are as a human and your impact on the world. And so having those conversations, not only with them, but also as you kind of sit and think, okay, where are my passions? What are my short-term and long-term goals? And will graduate school help support those? And what might that look like for you? Okay. Then also in terms of finding your fit, asking yourself the question of where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years, right? I know that you're like, Rachel, I just want to get through my semester. We're in a pandemic after all, right? And I understand that. I was in your shoes, many years ago, almost 20 years ago now. I can't hardly believe that. But so I did a master's degree right out of undergrad at the University of Iowa in library and information science, actually. And I started my career as a librarian. And then I pivoted into admissions and recruitment and did a second master's in business leadership. And that was 10 years into my career. So again, finding out where you see yourself in 5 to 10 years will help you find the right fit in terms of a graduate program. Also, career goals. Is it research? Is it teaching? Is it practice? Are you unsure? That will also help you find a fit because, again, when you enter a graduate program, those faculty advisors are not only professional mentors, but they're going to expand your network. Especially if you're going into a research focused program, you want to make sure that those faculty that you're going to be intersecting with can support your area of interest or the university can. And so those are things, again, to do a deep dive into what faculty are teaching in the program to make sure that they align with your interest. I've also included here a link to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I'm not going to click on it. I'm not going to bore you with those details, but I do think it's a great resource in terms of as you align what your passions are with career availability, and you can see via the Bureau of Labor Statistics, what is the career trajectory growth, okay? What is it going to look like in 10 years from now, and is there projected growth in a particular career that you're interested in? So start with your career and then kind of work backwards. Another clipboard. Okay, so the internet is fabulous, right? There's so much information, et cetera. So you could Google general program locators and rankings, gradschools.com, articles in graduate education, university websites, conferences, meetings, grad fairs. I know that's all virtual now. You're taking advantage today to kind of come today to this Wednesday workshop, which is wonderful, talking to campus representatives, et cetera. Talking with your faculty members. What are the professional organizations that you should start being exposed to, right? All of those things will help you determine finding the right fit. So choose one of those bullets. And over the next 3 to 4 weeks, right, identify some programs, identify a resource for you on campus, have a conversation, 15 to 20 minutes. And I encourage you to seek out a professional organization that you might not have been familiar with. If there's a conference, is it virtual? That will save costs, right, in terms of travel and all of those sorts of things that you could attend to begin that networking aspect. Okay. Also, another clipboard here. What do you consider important, right? Are demographics and culture important? Is the city important to you? Do you see yourself moving away from West Michigan, away from Grand Rapids, and then maybe returning back? Okay. Publications and research interest area, the faculty, I mentioned that earlier, how important that is. Requirements. So what are the requirements to enter into the program? When I, started applying, I had to take the GRE. Okay, sometimes now the GRE, the GMAT may be waived, and so is that test maybe a barrier? Of course, if you're looking at a professional program like at the med school, pharmacy, those professional tests, potentially can't be waived. The MCAT, LSAT, et cetera. But sometimes requirements play into things. Have you met the prerequisite courses, right? So those are things to take a peek at. Also, funding and resources. Can the graduate school, can the department provide funding? If they can't, how else will you fund? Is it through personal funds? Is it through federal financial aid? We'll talk about those pieces in a moment too. Cost of living, I hyperlinked that. There's a number of cost of living websites throughout. I know it's not the warm, fuzzy feeling all the time, but if you're thinking about graduate school and delaying entering the workforce, delaying earning an income, sometimes you have to think about cost of living. What is it going to cost me to live in Grand Rapids versus Iowa City versus Indianapolis versus whatever city you're looking at to move to for graduate school? So I think that's important too in finding the right fit. So again, be thinking of those things, jot a couple of down, right, that are important to you. So funding your graduate education. I hear this a lot, like, Rachel, how do I fund this, right? Again, it many times depends on the school, the type of program that you're looking at. So we're going to first chat about graduate assistantships, okay? So graduate assistantships essentially are working for a department. It's as simple as that. It could be a research assistant, a teaching assistant, doing special projects. Many times graduate assistantships, if they're full-time, you're working at least 20 hours a week, you're getting a stipend and a tuition waiver. That's fabulous, okay? That's how master's degrees, PhD programs typically are funded, through graduate assistantships. However, it depends on the school and the funding, right? So that's the ideal state. Some of you may decide, I need to work first, and then I'm going to pivot into a master's degree program, and I can work full time while I do it. And then maybe my employer will have some support, some tuition reimbursement. I might do it on a part-time basis, so I don't have to go at it as a full-time graduate student. And that's okay too. Again, it depends on if you're a career starter, enhancer, changer, right? In addition to that, there's obviously student loans. I know it's not sexy, you got to pay them back, right? But there are student loans available even for part-time graduate students. Ask about scholarships. Some departments will have scholarships available for prospective students. They might also have scholarships available for current students. So let's say you don't garner one in the first year of your master's degree program or your PhD program. There might be some availability as you progress. Same with graduate assistantships. You might not garner a GA position in that first year, but there could be something forthcoming in that second year. PhD programs, typically you want to be fully funded to enter a PhD program. And so those are pieces to start thinking about. Also, typically every graduate program at universities has what's called a graduate program director. Okay, so somebody that's leading that program. It's important for you to stay in touch with them because they will know what are the funding sources, what are the opportunities within their department, or perhaps throughout the university. Okay, so funding, scholarships, graduate assistantships, loans, personal funds, employer support, thinking through all of those pieces. Okay, this is where we get to the nitty gritty a little bit. It's the application part, right? And as you're thinking about finding a graduate school, so you found a great graduate school, you think it's the right fit, now you got to start the application process. And I cannot emphasize enough to watch the deadlines, right? Because they're going to vary. If you are applying to medical school, pharmacy school, any type of health professions program that's on a CAS system, which stands for usually Common Application System, that system is going to open almost a year in advance, right? So this, if you're looking at fall of 2022, that CAS system was going to open this summer of 2021, and you can start beginning kind of to see what that looks like. Also, I always recommend to prospective students and candidates to take a peek now to start, to kind of maybe, set up a profile. Don't put a lot in, right? Because it's typically is not going to be able to convert over to a new, to that new application period, if you will. But take a peek, see what they're asking for. Start thinking about how you're going to craft your narrative, your personal statement, and those sorts of things. Requirements vary. So you're going to research your program of interest, spend at least 30 minutes on the webpage. You're probably like, I know, Rachel, that's so obvious. But we get a lot of obvious questions, and that's okay. But if you can do that deep dive, that research, and then when you make contact with that graduate program director, asking them questions that are not obvious, right, is going to help build that relationship with that graduate program director. Also, typically what's standard is a personal statement, recommendation letters, transcript, of course, and a resume and CV. So as you think about the relationships that you're building now at Calvin, think about who will you ask to recommend you? Is it a faculty advisor? Is it a supervisor at work? Who will be able to read your personal statement? Again, I've loved working with Courtney and the rest of the team in the Career Center. You've got fabulous resources. Take advantage of them. You also might need to start preparing for the GRE, the GMAT, the MCAT, the LSAT, whatever, interest exam there may be. You might have to prepare a portfolio or writing sample. I know we've got a history major on the call and archaeology. Typically, depending on the program, you might have to produce a writing sample. Deadlines vary, as I mentioned. So understand the process as you think about going into graduate school and planning ahead. We kind of talked a little bit about this, but thinking about who will write your letters of recommendation. They need to be able to attest your ability to do graduate level work. Obviously, if you're in your career, many times the letter of recommendation may come from a supervisor or a colleague. Asking yourself, why do you want that degree? Why do you want to attend that institution and program? And making sure that if it's a personal statement that you're providing directly to the institution, that it becomes personal to that institution. Usually on a CAS system, you're writing a general narrative, and the institution might have a supplemental form that you're able to tailor specific questions to that particular school. Strong GPA, typically, again, utilizing your academic supports programs and writing centers to help supplement pieces of the puzzle that you're like, I'm preparing for a test, maybe the GRE. For me, I wasn't great at math. I'll be the first to say that. And I asked my high school teacher to tutor me before I took it, and he did. And so anyway, so those are things that be thinking about, doing some practice tests, et cetera, as you begin preparing for the application process. Also, things like volunteer engagement, mentoring, teaching. Again, I mentioned conferences, undergraduate research, and presentations. Those are things that can help you prepare for that application, okay, to be able to enhance it and setting yourself apart as a candidate, certainly. So those are things to think about adding to not only your resume, but to your co-curricular experiences at Calvin. So in short, and we did it, we're going to recap here. Thinking about your career, your future career, prepare yourself for graduate school while an undergraduate student. So check your transcripts. How are you doing in those prerequisite classes? Researching programs of interest, right? Checking requirements, explore funding options, cultivating relationships, working on your personal statement. And you're probably thinking, well, Rachel, is it that easy in 7 steps? No, you can see that it's hard work, right? It's a lengthy process. I was just telling a candidate the other day, it's like you're preparing for the long game, right? Where it's kind of this investment into you, into your future, and it is certainly can be a fairly lengthy process. So pace yourself, right? So thinking through those 7 things in terms of a recap, you see a little clipboard right there as well. What can you tackle today? What does it look like for you for the rest of the semester? How can you start tackling these pieces and kind of making those goals smaller and chunking it out, right? So it's not this overwhelming process as you proceed. So is graduate school right for me? You're the one that kind of needs to decide that, right? And to decide when alongside your mentors and the like. So that's the scoop. Questions. Courtney, I did it. We've got plenty of time for questions. I've left 9 minutes for us. So Talk to me. Anybody out there for questions? Hopefully that wasn't too fast. I get going. I think you're on mute.
Yep, that always happens. Yep. So I think it was a lot of information, but very valuable information. So thank you so much, Rachel, for doing that. At any time, guys, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I also put a resource from the Career Center website for grad school that kind of goes step by step through some of the things that Rachel said. So don't feel like you had to memorize everything or write it all down. We are here to help in the Career Center. And Rachel has her contact information up there. If you also want to reach out to her, feel free to do so. But we are so happy that, Rachel, you took the time out today to talk to us about it. I see Erin is typing something up, so I'm going to give her a second to finish that up.
Absolutely. And as she does that, I'm very happy to meet with students one-on-one. And I know it doesn't have to necessarily be about a Grand Valley State program. So as I mentioned, I've been recruiting for grad programs for a long time. And so our goal is to help you get on the best road that you feel the best about. So happy to help. Yeah. What do we got, Courtney?
All right. Erin says, do you have any websites or book recommendations for studying the GRE?
Yes. So Kaplan, this is back in the day. Now remember, I took this GRE back in 03. So that tells you everything you need to know, Erin. Sorry to be the bearer of the bad news that I'll turn 41 at the end of the month. But anyway, Kaplan study resources, I think they really helped me, right? So even, and I don't know, Courtney, for you to chime in too, does the Career Center provide some resources in the Career Center? I know sometimes they do, or public libraries do as well. I utilize that. There's a lot of practice tests out there, Erin, as well. So that will help you, because part of sometimes the GRE or any standardized test, as you can imagine, is the pacing of it, right? And so the pacing and the practice tests are actually the benefit in terms of, also certainly in terms of content. I get that, but many times it's like, oh my gosh, I'm in this testing environment. So practice tests will certainly help. I used Kaplan. That was way back in the day. Courtney, thoughts on
Me
that?
too. That's what I used to. But I would say meet with a career coach and ask them. I'm sure they have resources that they can give to you too for the GRE.
Yeah.
Or they're more aware of them than I am.
Mm-hmm. You're right. And I do know for a public library, they typically have some too that you can check out and such, but there's a lot of free online. And also many times those types of companies might have even, for lack of a better word, promotion codes that you can maybe get some free tests and those sorts of things. I don't want to spam you. Do you know what I'm saying? In terms of, like, sometimes those things are like, oh my gosh, now I've got to deal with all of that. So just be kind of wary. Anyway, on that.
All right. So it looks like that might be it for our questions.
Cool.
Oh, one just came in from Jonathan. Do you have any advice for people preparing for interviews for grad programs? Great question.
Yeah, so those interviews, okay. So it depends on the grad program, right? So that is something that you can certainly ask. Are they doing multiple mini interviews? So those interviews are examples would be like situational based questions where you're typically in a room for maybe 5 minutes and they're going to ask you a prompt and then you're going to respond to that prompt. So they're looking more at critical thinking skills, et cetera, and not necessarily a right answer. Some programs are going to do group interviews. So now you're going to be in a group, 3 to 5 students maybe. And so how do you set yourself apart? And they're looking at listening skills. They're looking at how do you respond to your peers, right, in that environment. Others might be one-on-one. So I always tell students, if you get to that interview stage, they know academically that you can do the work. Now you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you in terms of, is this going to be a good fit for the program, right? And so the best you can do is be well researched, right? Understand the program, the faculty in that program, et cetera. So I hope that helps. Just like you would prepare for a job interview, a grad school interview will be just very similar in terms of the research that you will need to do. But I would absolutely ask that graduate program what kind of format they're using, because it runs the gamut from one-on-one to multiple many to group. Courtney, thoughts on that too?
I would also say just you want to practice as much, just like you would for a regular interview. So the more practice you get, the better you will be at it. And I know that a career coach, they can also practice with you and take advantage of those resources.
Yeah. Great question.
All right. Oh, it looks like he's typing something else up. Oh, he said, thanks. That helps out a lot.
Very good. No problem, Jonathan.
So if there's no more questions, feel free to write some after the recording is over. The chat feature will still be live, so don't worry. You can still put in your questions there and I can send them to Rachel. But for everybody else here, thank you so much for coming out. Thanks again, Rachel, for offering your expertise with us. And that concludes our Workshop Wednesday.
Thanks, Courtney. Have a great evening.
Thank you.